ChatGPT said. The sun rose pale and warm over the coastal city of Dakar. A soft breeze carried the scent of salt from the Atlantic Ocean, and colorful market stalls began to hum with life. Inside a tall conference center near the water's edge, staff bustled about, setting up chairs and microphones for the Global Democracy Forum. Delegates from many nations would gather here today. Among them were two figures whose meeting would soon draw the world's attention: Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States, and Ibrahim Traoré, the newly appointed leader guiding Burkina Faso through a fragile transition. Kamala arrived first. She stepped from her convoy onto a red carpet that led into the glass doors. Her dark suit was crisp, her posture steady. Reporters and photographers formed a semicircle, cameras clicking as she walked forward. Kamala paused to greet a local child who held a small bouquet of flowers. The child's smile was bright, and Kamala leaned to accept the blooms, offering a kind word in Wolof before moving on. Inside, the grand hall gleamed. Rows of seats faced a stage with a long table draped in white. Behind it, a banner read Global Democracy Forum, Building Together. Volunteers in matching green vests hurried along aisles, checking name badges, and helping guests find their seats. Kamala stepped onto the stage and took her place at one end of the table. She glanced around, noting the flags of many countries lining the walls. Soon, Ibrahim Traoré entered. He emerged from a smaller entrance. To the side, flanked by his own team, his dark skin glowed under the bright lights. He wore a simple suit that spoke more of action than ceremony. His shoulders were straight, and his expression was calm but alert. As he climbed the few steps to the stage, staffers adjusted his microphone and handed him a glass of water. Kamala watched him from her seat. She noted his steady gaze and the quiet confidence in the way he moved. Though he was young by the standards of world leaders, barely, in his early 40s, he carried a sense of purpose that seemed older and wiser. She offered a small nod of greeting. Traoré returned it with a respectful bow of his head. Later, the moderator called the session to order. The hall hushed. Kamala opened with a few words about the purpose of the forum: to share ideas for strengthening democracy and promoting stability in regions that faced conflict, poverty, or political transition. Her voice was measured, clear, and full of authority. She spoke of lessons learned and partnerships formed between nations. She emphasized the importance of measurable progress and mutual respect. When it was Traoré's turn, he rose and faced the audience. His tone was softer, but earnest. He described the challenges his country faced: a fragile economy, threats from armed groups along its borders, and wide gaps in basic services like education and healthcare. But he did not dwell on despair. Instead, he spoke of hope and action. He outlined a plan to rebuild Burkina Faso from the ground up, focusing on local councils, farming cooperatives, and training programs for young people. He called it a people's rebuilding, led by citizens rather than foreign experts. As he spoke, Kamala listened intently, taking notes on a small pad. She noted each point: the plan for local councils, the youth training corps, the idea of cooperative farming. She also listened to the undercurrent in his words: a clear desire to assert sovereignty and to move beyond dependency on foreign aid. She could sense that his plan went beyond simple development. It was a statement of dignity and self-reliance. After Traoré finished, applause filled the room. Kamala joined in, clapping politely. The moderator invited both leaders to remain on stage for a panel discussion. Behind the scenes, aides whispered and exchanged quick glances. A respectful but firm exchange between these two would set the tone for future cooperation or conflict. Before the discussion began, Kamala leaned toward Traoré and said quietly, "Your plan is ambitious. But sometimes ambition can look like empty words. How will you avoid posturing?" Her voice was low, but her message was clear. He met her gaze without blinking. Traoré gave a calm smile. He replied, "Madam Vice President, I understand your concern. My goal is not to make grand speeches. It is to build real change step by step." He set his glass of water aside and tapped the table lightly. "We have already begun on the ground. I will share details when you ask." Kamala nodded once, her face giving nothing away. Then the moderator raised his hand and began the formal panel. The room fell silent again. Kamala opened the discussion. With a question, Mr. Traoré, you've outlined many goals: improving security, boosting agriculture, strengthening governance. What is your timeline for these reforms, and how will you measure success? Her tone was firm but respectful. She spoke in simple, direct language. Traoré leaned forward. He spoke of timeframes measured in months, not years. He described how, within 90 days, local council elections would seat new representatives in 5 regions. He explained that the Youth Corps had already enrolled 2,000 volunteers to repair roads and upgrade irrigation canals. He said the cooperative farming projects had completed their first planting season with promising yield reports. He stressed that these were not promises for a distant future. They were actions already underway. Kamala listened, her pen moving. Across the pad, she asked follow-up questions about funding sources and accountability. He answered each without hesitation, describing transparent budgets posted online and community feedback sessions scheduled every 2 weeks. His answers were factual and concrete. As the panel continued, the 2 leaders exchanged ideas in front of the audience. When Kamala mentioned possible U.S. support, Traoré expressed appreciation but also insisted on clear terms that respected Burkina Faso's leadership. He said, "We welcome partnership, but we must remain in the driver's seat." Kamala smiled at that. She understood the balance between assistance and control. At one point, a reporter in the audience stood and asked a challenging question. "Vice President Harris, do you think Mr. Traoré's timeline is realistic? Minister, do you worry that local councils may be unprepared for these new responsibilities?" Kamala paused, then said, "I respect the minister's passion, but yes, I share concerns about capacity. Posturing without capacity can lead to disappointment." The word posturing echoed in the hall. Traoré responded smoothly, "Madam Vice President, I would not stand here promising what I cannot deliver. I would rather build quietly than speak loudly." He looked at Kamala. Directly, "My approach is to work with local leaders, train them, equip them, and then let their results speak for themselves." The audience reacted with a mixture of murmurs and nods. Kamala's aides exchanged looks, impressed by his calm but firm reply. She took a breath, then said, "I look forward to seeing those results. I hope our work together can turn words into progress." With that, the panel ended. Delegates gave a final round of applause as Kamala and Traoré stood, shook hands, and returned to their seats. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment when 2 leaders tested each other's intent and found common ground. After the event, in a quiet backstage area, Kamala reviewed her notes. She leaned back in a leather chair and tapped her pen against her chin. She thought about his confident reply, his clear plan, and the respect he showed for his own people. She realized that this young leader was not just talking. He had begun to build. Meanwhile, Traoré returned to his delegation's tent. Advisors waited with updated field reports, community meetings held in 3 new villages, irrigation repairs completed on a small canal, and local council candidates vetted and ready. He reviewed each report with satisfaction. His plan was unfolding, exactly as he had hoped. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped lower, Kamala walked through the forum's garden lounge. Traoré approached from the opposite path. They met under a flowering bougainvillea tree. She smiled and said, "Minister Traoré, I admit I came in wary of grand speeches, but I see action behind yours." He replied, "Vice President, words can inspire, but building can change lives." They stood there for a moment, 2 leaders from different worlds, united by a shared commitment to real progress. Around them, the forum continued, but this meeting remained a quiet moment of understanding. The work ahead would be hard, but they had both shown that they cared less about appearances and more about results. And in that shared spirit, the first true step toward partnership was already complete. ChatGPT said, "The next morning, the sky above Dakar was soft with early light." Delegates gathered again, but Ibrahim Traoré's mind was already on home. He thought of the dusty roads winding through Burkina Faso's villages. He pictured women carrying water, children walking to school, and farmers tending small fields of millet and sorghum. He had promised change, and now the real work must begin. After a quick breakfast of tropical fruit and strong coffee, Traoré slipped away with two of his closest aides. They walked through the conference center's back corridors, past busy registration desks and media rooms, until they reached a modest meeting room lined with maps. On the largest map, a network of colored pins marked the 5 regions where local councils would soon hold elections. Blue pins showed villages ready. Yellow pins marked places that still needed training. Red pins pointed to areas where security teams must clear mines or bandit trails. Traoré tapped a yellow pin near the eastern border. "This area has new volunteers," he said quietly. "But they still need tools and shelter." One aide nodded, opening a tablet to a budget spreadsheet. They reviewed the figures for tents, water tanks, and basic farming tools. Traoré closed his eyes for a moment, imagining the faces of families who might soon sleep under a sturdy tarp and water, their fields before the sun climbed overhead. Back in the main hall, Kamala Harris finished a discussion with a group of women leaders from West Africa. They spoke of challenges: schools without desks, clinics without medicine, roads turned to mud in the rainy season. Kamala listened, her pen moving across a pad. She asked about partnerships and accountability. She offered to connect their organizations to USAID programs, but she also warned that any help would require clear reports and shared leadership. She wanted to ensure that local voices stayed in charge. As she left the room, an aide handed her a note from Traoré's team. They requested a short meeting before her next panel. Kamala looked at the note's neat handwriting. "Minister. Traoré requests brief time to discuss joint task force details." She folded the note, nodded, and gave a small smile. She was curious to learn more. Midday sunlight warmed the courtyard outside the center. Traoré stepped onto bright tiles, his aides at his side. He spotted Kamala seated on a wooden bench under a wide umbrella. She rose as he approached, and they shook hands again. Nearby, a small table held bottled water and bowls of sliced mango. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. "You for meeting me," Traoré said. His voice was calm but eager. "I would like to propose a joint task force to oversee our efforts. We can combine your technical experts with our local teams." He pointed to a notebook in his aide's hand. "We have drafted an outline." Kamala glanced at the pages. She saw clear sections: security, agriculture, governance, and monitoring. Each section listed roles for Burkina Faso leaders and U.S. specialists. Under security, it noted joint patrol training and new communication equipment for border posts. Under agriculture, it described seed sharing, irrigation workshops, and market development. Governance included training for council members on budgeting, record-keeping, and community outreach. Monitoring called for twice-monthly reports, public dashboards, and village feedback sessions. She looked up at Traoré. "This is very detailed," she said. "You've thought through every step." He nodded. "We must show results soon. If we wait too long, people will lose hope," Kamala agreed. "I will bring this to my team in Washington." She paused. "But we must agree on clear benchmarks." Traoré smiled. "I have suggested dates here," he said, pointing to a timeline. 90-day milestones for the first 3 tasks, 6-month goals for the next 4. It all fit together like pieces of a puzzle. They spent 20 minutes refining the plan. Kamala asked about training materials. Traoré Shade explained that local teachers and retired civil servants would carry out workshops. Using simple guides translated into French and local languages, Kamala suggested digital tools apps that could track crop yields in council. Attendance. Traoré's team hesitated. Internet was scarce in remote areas. He said, "Perhaps we can begin with paper, then introduce digital slowly as we improve connectivity." Kamala nodded. "That makes sense. We can support solar-powered." Tablets later, their meeting ended with a handshake. As they stood, Kamala offered Traoré a small gift: a pen engraved with the U.S. seal and the motto, "Together we build." He accepted it gratefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. Around them, staff prepared for the afternoon sessions. But both leaders felt that this brief moment had set the real tone for their partnership. In the afternoon panel, Kamala spoke of the joint task force she and Traoré had just sketched. She described it as a model of equal partnership, no country dominating, but a shared effort. The audience responded with applause, and Traoré offered a modest bow and thanks. Then each returned to their own work. Later, as the forum wound down, Traoré gathered his delegation for a final briefing before he returned home. They sat in a circle under the conference's high-ceilinged foyer. He reviewed the morning's site visits, the planned council elections, and the security team's supply needs. He emphasized communication. Every village leader must feel heard. Every farmer must know how to join the cooperatives, and every volunteer must see their efforts valued. One advisor asked about funding delays. Traoré replied firmly, "We will not wait for all funds before starting. We will begin with what we have. We must build momentum." He spoke of using local contributions, labor, materials, ideas alongside foreign support. He said, "When people invest their own effort, they own the change." His words were met with nods and murmurs of agreement. Meanwhile, Kamala returned to her hotel for a short rest before catching a flight home. In her suite, she reviewed the notes from the day, the women leaders' requests, the draft task force, the timeline. She drafted a message to the U.S. National Security Council. "Minister Traoré's plan is grounded. I recommend we move forward with pilot support in the Eastern region. Seek approval for seed distribution and governance training." She attached the outline they had refined together. As evening fell, Dakar's lights sparkled around her window. She felt a quiet satisfaction. She had entered the forum with cautious optimism. Now she left with a real plan, born of conversation and compromise. A team member knocked and announced her car.
Ow.
She gathered her papers and rose. As she stepped into the elevator, she thought of the dusty roads in Burkina Faso. She hoped that by the time her next trip came, she would hear stories of new schools filled with children, of markets bustling with traders, and of roads repaired by hands strengthened with pride. On the drive back to the airport, Traoré's mind raced in the opposite direction. He dreamed of the first council meetings under shady trees, of Youth Corps volunteers proudly fixing potholes, and of cooperative fields yielding grain for hungry families. He pictured his country taking shape built not by speeches alone, but by many hands working together toward a common goal. In the quiet of the night, both leaders prepared for the work ahead. They were continents apart, yet bound by a shared phrase, building over posturing. And in that promise, they had found a path that could lift the lives of many, step by careful step. The sun beat down on the dusty village square as Ibrahim Traoré stepped from the pickup truck with his team. Women carried jerry cans of water on their heads, and children paused in their play to stare at the foreign vehicles. Traoré smiled and greeted each person he passed. He wore a light shirt rolled at the sleeves, boots dusted by the road. Round him, the flags of Burkina Faso fluttered on poles, and nearby, a simple wooden table held papers and pens. Today was the first day of local council elections in this eastern region. Traoré remembered when he was a boy how village decisions were made by elders in a dark hut. Now, thanks to his plan, every adult would vote to choose a representative. He believed this step was more than politics. It was people learning to lead themselves. A tall youth volunteer named Amina guided Traoré to the registration tent. Inside, dozens of villagers waited patiently in two lines, one for men, one for women. Amina explained that they had trained local staff to check identity cards, mark voters' thumbs with ink, and hand out ballots printed in French and the local Moor language. Traoré watched as a mother with a baby on her back showed her card, dipped her thumb, and took her folded ballot. She entered the voting booth a simple wooden box, smiled at Traoré, then slipped her paper into a wooden ballot box. Nearby, a small group of U.S. technical experts unloaded solar-powered tablets and portable printers. They set up a table underneath a baobab tree. Their role was to record voter turnout numbers and send daily reports by satellite to Ouagadougou. One expert, Maria, explained the system to Traoré in simple terms. "We scan the tally sheets here. Then the data goes to your national dashboard." Traoré nodded. He liked technology, but he also knew that solar power could falter in heavy rain. He made a mental note to ask for extra battery packs. As midday approached, Traoré walked through the square again. He saw his security team patrolling. Discreetly among the crowd, these were soldiers trained in human rights. They wore light uniforms with the Burkina Faso flag on their sleeves. Their presence was meant to deter troublemakers, but not to frighten ordinary people. Traoré greeted their commander, Captain Ouedraogo, who reported calmly, "No incidents so far. All villages are voting peacefully." Captain Ouedraogo had overseen security during the Youth Corps road repairs, and Traoré trusted him deeply. In the afternoon, under the same tree, Traoré called a quick meeting with his field officers. They opened a map showing the next 2 villages scheduled for elections. One village, marked in yellow, still lacked enough ink and ballots. Traoré gave clear orders. "We will send 2 more boxes of ink and blank ballots tonight. We'll set up early tomorrow." He also reminded them to check on security. "Captain, please ensure your team visits there after dark to speak with local elders." The officers agreed, and Traoré watched them file back to their vehicles. Meanwhile, in Washington, Kamala Harris sat in a secure conference room with her team. On a large screen, the solar tablet's data streamed in, numbers of registered voters, turnout rates, and basic comments from village feedback sessions. She saw that the first village had 82% turnout. She smiled. This was a glowing start. But she also noticed a note: delayed supplies in Village 2. She tapped her pen. She sent a quick message. "Please ensure immediate delivery." Of ballots? Delay? Unacceptable. Her aide replied, "Understood, Madam Vice President. We are arranging a helicopter drop if roads are blocked." Kamala nodded. She knew that remote villages could suffer when rains washed out roads. She trusted Traoré's plan would adapt, back in Burkina Faso as the sun sank low. Blue and orange streaking the sky, Traoré visited a gathering of cooperative farmers under another baobab. These farmers had received new seeds and irrigation plans. They held small sacks of grain, showing the bright kernels they had harvested in the first trial plot. Traoré knelt beside a woman named Fanta, who handed him a handful of millet. "Look," she said, pointing to a tall stalk. "Before I could only grow this high. Now, with the new seeds and drip irrigation, I have doubled the yield."
Right.
Placed his hand over hers. He felt the warmth of the grain and the pride in her eyes. "This is the future," he said softly. "Your hard work is building our country." At night, after the last vote tally was sent, Traoré joined his team. In the makeshift command center, inside a school building, maps, laptops, and papers covered old desks. Volunteers celebrated quietly as turnout numbers exceeded expectations. Traoré rose and addressed them. "Tonight, you have shown what we can do when we work together. Tomorrow we must keep going. We have 4 more regions to cover this week." He paused, looking at each face in the dim light. Young and old, they nodded, tired but determined. Meanwhile, Kamala's schedule in Washington was tight. She spoke on a web conference about security aid in the Sahel. A reporter asked, "Vice President, how do you respond to critics who say these local elections are a token gesture?" She leaned forward. "These elections are a crucial part of Minister Traoré's plan. They give citizens a voice and hold leaders accountable. Look at the numbers. Over 80% turnout shows people want change." She pressed play on a short video feed from Dhaka, showing villagers casting ballots. The room erupted in applause. The next morning in Burkina Faso, Traoré set out early for the second region. He and his team traveled by 4-wheel drive through dirt roads pocked with potholes. Dust rose behind them like smoke. Children ran alongside the vehicle, waving. In one village, drought had been a constant threat. But now, thanks to small reservoirs built by the Youth Corps last month, fields stayed moist longer. Traoré hopped out, grabbed a shovel, and helped fill sandbags to repair a reservoir wall. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he worked without pause. A local elder asked, "Minister, why work with us instead of staying in the capital?" Traoré wiped his brow and said, "Because I know you. I know what you need. Building together means standing beside you." As the day wore on, he visited a women's cooperative meeting in a simple community hall. Women sat in a circle, notebooks in their laps. They took turns reporting on loan repayments and market connections. Traoré listened carefully. He asked about challenges. Some roads remained impassable after rain, and some volunteers had yet to receive their stipends. He promised to look into both, he said. Your voices must guide us. Tell us what you need, and we will find a way. The room filled with quiet gratitude. Late that afternoon, Traoré returned to Ouagadougou for a live video call with Kamala. On his side, a projector screen showed him in the community hall. On her side, a team of advisors in suits watched. She smiled and said, Minister, I see real work happening. Thank you for including me, replied. Madam Vice President, your support is vital. But the real power belongs to our people. They know their land best. He shared data on voter turnout, crop yields, and security patrols. Kamala nodded as she studied the figures. 85% turnout, 30% increase in harvest, 0 security incidents. She said, impressive results. Let's expand this model to the remaining regions. They agreed on the next steps. Additional funding for tractors, expansion of the Youth Corps program, and more training workshops for council members. Kamala offered to send a team of governance experts to help develop local training materials. Traoré welcomed this as long as the materials remained simple and accessible. He said, we will translate them into local languages and use radio programs to reach remote areas. Kamala agreed. Their partnership felt balanced, each side giving and receiving. That evening, as the sky glowed with a purple dusk, Traoré walked alone through a quiet park near his hotel. He thought of the day's meetings and visits. He reflected on the pride in the farmers' faces, the energy of the women's cooperative, and the respect he saw in security volunteers. He understood that building a nation took many small acts, a repaired road, a fair vote, a shared training session. He felt tired but hopeful. In Washington, Kamala closed her files after midnight. She thought of the live feed, a leader who got his hands dirty, who listened to his people, and who refused empty words. She felt proud of her decision to back him. She believed that this partnership could show the world a new way of doing diplomacy, not with speeches on grand stages alone, but with hard work in villages, transparent actions, and respect for local leadership, as night deepened in both capitals. Two leaders slept under different roofs. Yet in their dreams they stood side by side in Burkina Faso's fields and village squares. In those dreams they heard the rustle of millet stalks, the murmur of villagers casting ballots, and the laughter of children playing by new reservoirs. They saw a country growing stronger, built by many hands working together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, storms, budget delays, and questions from critics. But they had shown that building with purpose could overcome empty posturing. In that belief, the real story of progress continued, one village, one vote, and one harvest at a time. The first light of dawn crept across the sky as Ibrahim Traoré prepared for another day of work in the northern region. His clothes were simple, a light shirt, sturdy trousers, and well-worn boots. He drank a cup of plain tea and ate a small piece of bread before stepping outside the guest house. His team waited by a convoy of dusty trucks. Today, they would visit the newly built market and the women's processing cooperative in the next town. As they drove, Traoré looked out over golden fields. He remembered the barren plains he had seen not long ago. Now small patches of green told a different story. He smiled, knowing the seeds they had shared were taking root. Near a bend in the road, children ran alongside their vehicles, waving hello. Their faces were bright with curiosity. A volunteer raised his hand in greeting, and the children laughed and waved back. Their first stop was the new marketplace built by the Youth Corps. It stood on a raised platform of packed earth, sheltered by a corrugated iron roof. Stalls lined 3 sides, and in the center was a wide space for carts to unload goods. Traoré stepped off the vehicle into the bustling activity. Farmers arranged bundles of fresh vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, and millet stalks. Merchants displayed baskets of dried fish and jars of honey. A young farmer named Moussa approached him. He held out a handful of bright red peppers. "Minister," he said, voice full of pride, "before I sold my peppers by the roadside for half price. Now I come here and traders bid fair prices. Traoré took a pepper gently between his fingers. It was fresh and firm. He smiled and said, "This market is your doing, Mousa. You built it with your own hands. It belongs to all of you." Mousa's eyes shone. He nodded and bent to help a customer select peppers. Nearby, a small group of U.S. advisors set up a notice board. They pinned charts showing daily sales totals, price trends, and market rules. One chart showed that sales had increased by 30% since the market opened. Another listed prices for common goods, helping buyers and sellers agree on fair costs. A woman named Aisha, who led the market committee, thanked the advisors. She spoke in French, and Traoré translated simply, "We will post these reports every morning. Traders will know what to expect." From the market, they moved to the Cooperative Processing Center. It was a low building with large windows and a sturdy door. Inside, women sat at long tables, shelling groundnuts, sorting grains, and packing small bags for sale. The air smelled of roasted peanuts and fresh cotton sacks. Bright posters on the walls reminded workers of safety steps and quality standards. Traoré greeted the cooperative's leader, Geneva. She was a tall woman with close-cropped hair and confident eyes. She stood beside a row of new machines, a hand-powered grinder for peanuts and a simple press for shea butter. Geneva showed how the grinder turned raw nuts into paste, ready for cakes or soap. Then she pointed to large blocks of shea butter cooling on wooden boards. "Minister, these machines have tripled our output, can sell to nearby towns and even to the city." He watched as women took turns at the grinder, sharing tasks with easy teamwork. Young girls sorted nutshells into baskets for compost. Older women packaged the paste into small clay pots. The room hummed with energy. Traoré spoke softly to Geneva. "Your cooperative is a model. It shows how local work can create real income." She nodded. "We plan to open another workshop next month in the eastern region." When they stepped outside, Traoré noticed dark clouds gathering overhead. Rain would come soon. He checked his watch and said, "Let us finish with the market committee." Before the storm, they walked back to the notice board under the trees. Aisha and her team greeted him. He said, "Tomorrow, please bring rain covers for the charts and a tarpaulin for the new stalls. We must protect these papers and goods." Aisha replied, "We will have them ready by sunrise." Rain began to patter on the metal roof, and his team balanced their hats and huddled under an open shelter. He watched as raindrops formed small rivers along the roof's edges. He thought of farmers who would welcome this water for their fields. But he also knew that heavy rain could wash away roads again. He turned to Captain Adrago, the security commander, and asked, "How are the roads holding up, Captain?" Odrago replied, "Some roads are flooded, Minister. We have detours marked, but the Youth Corps needs trucks with higher clearance." Traoré nodded and said, "I will ask our partners to send 2 trucks with larger tires. Cannot let rain stop our work." The storm passed as quickly as it came, leaving the ground damp and the air fresh. Traoré led his team back to the trucks. They drove through red mud, splashing past puddles. At one point, they stopped to help push a small bus that had gotten stuck. Traoré joined the effort, pushing alongside passengers and onlookers until the bus moved free. The driver thanked him, and Traoré said, "When we build, we must also help each other." Late afternoon found them at a schoolyard where local council members held a workshop. Under a shady tree, small groups sat with notebooks and pens. Traoré took a seat at the front. A young council member, Adama, spoke about budget planning. He said, "Minister, we have funds for road repair, but we need to decide which roads first." He showed a list: the village access road, the market road, and the path to the health clinic. Traoré asked, "Which road helps the most people?" Adama replied, "The path to the clinic is critical. In the rainy season, mothers cannot reach care for their children." The group nodded. Traoré smiled and said, "Then let us repair that first. After that, we will fix the market road. And every decision we make, we will record in a simple book and share openly." He tapped a stack of fresh notebooks on the table. "These books are for your records." People clapped quietly. Traoré looked around the circle and said, "Each of you is now a leader. You share responsibility for your community. Keep meeting, keep planning, keep building." He rose and walked among them, shaking hands and offering words of encouragement. "You are doing a great job. Your work matters. Keep listening to your people." As the sun sank low, Traoré returned to his hotel for a short rest. He felt the day's fatigue, but also a deep sense of purpose. He knew that building a nation was not quick work. It required patience, sweat, and small victories. Meanwhile, in Washington, Kamala Harris sat in a secure office reviewing reports. Her staff displayed photos: the busy market, the processing cooperative, the council workshop. She saw Traoré pushing the bus, helping with his own hands. She pointed to her team and said, "This is leadership by example." They agreed to send a message: commend the minister's hands-on approach and secure funding for roadworthy trucks. That evening, Traoré joined a simple dinner with his team. They ate rice, beans, and grilled fish by candlelight. Conversations flowed. Volunteers told stories of children dancing when see their fields growing. Council members spoke of newfound confidence. Security teams shared relief that villages felt safer. Traoré listened, offering praise and gentle guidance. "Remember why we serve. Each task is for our people." Back in his room, he wrote a brief message to Kamala. "Today we saw real progress. The market thrives, the cooperative grows, and councils lead. Tomorrow we continue with the clinic road. Thank you for your trust." He pressed send. Kamala received the note as she prepared for bed. She read his words and thought of the puddles shimmering on the red earth. She believed that partnership, grounded in action, could shine a path forward. In both capitals, under different stars, two leaders ended their days with shared hope. The work ahead was long, but every stall erected, every road repaired, and every vote cast reminded them that building together would bring lasting change. With that promise, they rested, ready for the next day's steps forward. The morning sun rose softly over Ouagadougou, painting the sky in pale gold. In the center of the city, near the refurbished market and beside the newly paved clinic road, a ribbon stretched between two poles. Colorful balloons swayed gently. In the breeze, townspeople gathered around, their faces bright with curiosity and hope. Today was the big day, the official opening of the market expansion and the clinic access road. Ibrahim Traoré stepped forward wearing a simple jacket over his light shirt. His boots bore the dust of the villages he had visited, a mark of the work he had done. He looked at the crowd: farmers, traders, mothers with children, council members, volunteers, and soldiers who had kept the peace. He saw pride in their eyes. He saw promise. He felt a wave of warmth in his chest. Nearby, Kamala Harris stood. Under a white canopy, flanked by her team of advisors, she had flown in last night, determined to witness the progress for herself. She wore a plain dress and low heels. Her smile was calm, full of respect for the people who had labored here. She stood ready to share in the moment, to show that the partnership they built in words had taken shape in the red earth of Burkina Faso. Traoré began to speak. His voice was steady and clear. He told the crowd how just months ago, this place, it was a muddy field where only a few sold goods by the roadside. He recalled how the youth corps had worked day and night to level the ground and bring in stones. He remembered the long talks with women's cooperative leaders who had dreamed of a safe place to sell their produce. He spoke of council members who had learned to plan budgets, decide on road repairs, and listen to their neighbors. He paused and looked at the ribbon. "Today," he said, "we celebrate more than a market and a road. We celebrate our work together, villagers, volunteers, and leaders. We celebrate your hands, your sweat, and your hope." Applause broke out across the square. Children who had watched the trucks arrive 6 weeks before now held small flaglets. Waving them eagerly, Kamala stepped forward next. She lifted a pair of scissors and addressed the crowd. "Minister Traoré and I stood together at a forum in Dakar," she said. "We faced questions about posturing versus building. Today I see that building has one. You have shown what real partnership can do." She turned to Traoré and offered him the scissors. They both held the blades, and with a swift move, they cut the ribbon together. A cheer rose as the ribbon fell away. Farmers rushed into the stalls to set down fresh baskets of vegetables. Traders unloaded sacks of grain and jars of honey. The market hummed with new life. Nearby, villagers gathered by the roadway leading to the health clinic. The smooth path, free of potholes, stretched across the red earth. Mothers with babies in their arms walked safely. Men led donkeys carrying firewood along the edge. New road meant easier travel, quicker help, and stronger ties between town and clinic. As the crowd explored the market, Traoré and Kamala walked side by side. He pointed out a stall where women sold groundnut paste, packaged in clay pots labeled with the cooperative logo. She examined the signboard showing daily sales and price trends, noting the 35% increase since opening. He smiled. "This board helps us all agree on fair prices," he said. "No one can cheat here," she nodded, impressed by the clear charts and simple setup. They moved on to the council's office, a small building with fresh white paint and new benches. Inside, council members greeted them, holding the notebooks given months before. They showed pages of meeting notes, budgets, plans for the next phase, expanding irrigation, building a school fence, and improving the water well near the clinic. A young council member, Fatima, spoke up. "Minister, Madam, Vice President, this work has taught us to lead together, plan with our neighbors, share our needs openly, and follow through." Kamala asked about challenges they still faced. Fatima pointed to a small map of nearby villages that still lacked enough seed. 4 fields. She asked for more support to reach them before planting season. Traoré nodded and said, "We have arranged for more seed deliveries next week. We will use the youth corps to bring them by cart if roads remain difficult," Kamala added, "and we will send a team to help train more volunteers in handling seeds and organizing cooperatives. Our goal is to reach every village." Outside, they joined a group of Youth Corps volunteers who had helped rebuild roads and plant fields. These young people beamed as Traoré thanked them for their hard work. He shook hands with each volunteer and asked their names and stories. One young man, Issa, said, "Before I had no work. Now I learn new skills, earn some money, and help feed my family." A young woman, Hawa, added, "I feel proud to fix roads that help mothers reach clinics. I feel part of something bigger." Kamala listened, then said, "Your work inspires many. I will share your story in Washington so others see what you have built." She took Ayas's hand and said, "Thank you for your service." He grinned. "It is my honor." As the celebration continued, Traoré slipped away with a few aides to a nearby tree shading a small bench. He looked out at the market stalls and the busy road. He felt the cool breeze carry the sound of laughter and chatter. He took a deep breath and said softly, "We did this together." One aide nodded and showed him a tablet with the latest data. Voter turnout for the council elections had averaged 88% in this region. Harvest yields rose by 40%, and security incidents dropped to 0. Traoré smiled at the numbers, but looked again at the people. He said, "Numbers are good, but the real measure is hope in children's eyes, trust in neighbors, and pride in one's work." Elsewhere, Kamala joined a circle of elders. Under another tree, they offered her kola nuts in greeting. She accepted graciously, praising their hospitality. They spoke of their grandchildren, of nights spent worrying about rain and hunger, and of how today felt like the first time in years they dared to believe in tomorrow. An elder named Mousa placed his hand gently on her arm and said, "Madam Vice President, thank you for believing in us. Thank you for standing with our young leader." Kamala bowed her head in respect. "It is your strength that guides us," she replied. As afternoon turned to evening, the festival atmosphere grew. Musicians struck drums and flutes, and dancers, in bright cloths, moved in circles. People shared bowls of jollof rice and grilled fish. Children chased each other with balloons. Market traders offered samples of honey and peanut cakes. The air was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of fresh earth. Traoré stepped onto a raised platform and called for quiet. The music faded. He said, "Today marks a beginning, not an end. We have built a market and a road, yes, But our real work is to keep building schools, clinics, irrigation, and more. We must teach our people to be confident, to lead, and to help each other. We will expand these projects to every part of our country, he gestured to Kamala. We will do this with the support of partners like the United States, who understand that real help means respect and shared leadership. Kamala raised her hand in support. Together, we will continue to build, learn, and grow. I am proud to stand with Burkina Faso and its people. The crowd cheered as drums began again. Night fell, and lanterns lit the market square. Walked among the stalls one last time. He saw a child sleeping in her mother's arms, lulled by the distant music. He saw an old man counting his earnings, smiling at the end of a busy day. He saw volunteers packing up laptops and papers ready to return to Ouagadougou for the next region's launch. He felt a deep peace. Kamala joined him by the lantern glow. They stood side by side, watching the dance of light and shadow. She said, "This is what building looks like." He nodded, then offered her a simple gift, a small woven basket filled with millet stalks and a jar of honey. "To remember this day," he said. "To remember what we can do when we build together." She accepted the basket with a warm smile. "I will carry it home as a sign of hope." As the celebrations continued around them, two leaders from different worlds shared a quiet moment of reflection. In the soft glow of the lanterns, they saw the promise of a future built on action, respect, and partnership. And in that promise, they found the true meaning of building one step, one village, and one lifetime at a time.